Hey, this is Huck. If you want to watch this top three asshole keep doing esports content, subscribe to Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is Andy Miller, who in the esports world you may know as the chairman, co-founder and co-owner of NRG Esports, the one that Shaq pretends every now and then he follows, and just because he has his money in and someone smarter than him told him to put the money in. It's all right, you don't have to answer that, mate. Just married on the situation there. So there's also a lot we can talk about in this sense because you're also someone who has ownership in the Sacramento Kings in the NBA, and you have a very interesting tech background, actually. So I actually wanted to start there initially. So I was listening to, obviously in the Call of Duty world, you now work with Hex, formerly of Optic, now in the NRG squad, obviously, as the Huntsman in CDL. And I noticed you guys do a podcast. So I was listening to the most recent one of that, where you actually address in that some of your tech background, where basically you had like a small like telco type company, like a telecom company, and then you sold that to Apple, and then you went and worked at Apple, and that's basically where I'm going to go ahead and guess you must have dined out on some of these stories, mate, because if everyone hears that you not only worked for Apple, but you worked for Apple when Steve Jobs was there, and you were in the room talking to Steve Jobs, like, there must be a million questions. I bet everyone asks you about Steve Jobs, right?
It's true. So I started a text messaging company like before text messaging was really a thing here in the U.S. I was actually out in Europe and working at another company, and I was seeing everybody, with their phones nonstop and texting each other. And I was like, what the hell? Like, we don't have this. And, long story short, we got involved with the company and we interconnected all the carriers together. So like if I was on Sprint and you were on Verizon back then, we couldn't be friends. We couldn't interop. There was no.
All right.
Yeah. So we couldn't text each other. So we kind of connected all the carriers through this weird approach of trying to do marketing, and then realized it would be a lot better to carry messaging and do premium messaging, which was back in the day. Like if you wanted a ringtone, remember ringtones and
Sure.
horoscopes, we did all that crap, and then got into like American Idol voting, which I told you on our Energy Duo podcast almost ruined the company because there was so much volume.
Oh, no doubt, yeah.
We did Major League Baseball alerts, which was amazing that MLB gave a startup of like 33 guys the faith to do alerts, and it was bad. Some of it was good. We were learning, but we literally sometimes we'd get the call and be like, oh no, like a Red Sox Yankees score would go out 2 days after the game ended, that type of
right
thing. It was disaster. But that was like the original get me into mobile. And actually that company I sold to VeriSign out here in California. We were in Boston. And guess who the CEO was back then of VeriSign? It was Stratton Sklavos of Echo Fox fame.
Right.
So Stratton ended up, after he left VeriSign, he and Rick Fox and those guys did Echo Fox together, which was kind of a little nutty inside thing there. So I met him and decided very quickly I didn't want to work for him. that was not for me. So I then quickly left and started Quattro Wireless, which was the mobile advertising network that Apple bought. And I moved out from Boston to out here in California 10 years ago, and I worked for Steve. So back to your original question, like not only was Steve sourced the business, so he had been sick, he'd come back, he got really sick, he came back, and the first thing I guess he asked some of his lieutenants there was, where's my mobile ad network? I got to get a mobile ad network for Apple. Otherwise, everyone's going to monetize their ads through Google, because still now like 90-something% of all the app usage is free. Right. So he didn't want all these app developers getting a check from Google every month instead of from Apple. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother to develop for iOS platform. So he went right out, and I was in London. Actually, I went to a Patriots game. You know how they play those like
preseason ones or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I went with like my two co-founders, and we were like, we gotta, it's not that far a trip from Boston, 6-7 hour flight, whatever. And we're like, let's go, because it was just so stressful, the startup world. And we went out there, and the game had ended, and we were walking, and my phone rang, and I was like, oh, California number, and I picked it up, and I heard this is Andy Miller. I was like, yeah, this is Apple calling for Steve Jobs. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And they're like, no, it's Steve Jobs. We'd like to have a conversation with you. And I hung up. I was like, come on, I'm in London. I'm told I've had like 3 beers, 4 beers.
Sure.
Like, I don't buy any of this. And and then it rang again, and I stopped, and my friends kept walking, my co-founders, and I picked it up, and it was Apple, and it was the head of corp dev this time. And he was like, hey, we were interested in buying your company. Are you interested in selling it? I was like, yeah. He's like, do you want to come out to Cupertino and have a conversation? It's like, sure, when? And they're like, how about tomorrow? And I said, oh, actually, I'm in England now. And they're like, so? And I'm like, yeah, no, I need a few days, because once I realized it was real, I wanted to prepare. So I was like, okay. And then we made a date, and I said, all right, we'll see you there. And I just stopped, and I couldn't even believe that they called, because no one had thought Apple was going to buy an ad network, like maybe Yahoo or, people who were in the ad game. Apple didn't do anything, right? They barely even made their own ads back then. Steve's famous quote is, he wanted to be on magazines, right? He was like, you buy the back cover and I'll get myself on the front cover. That was always his line. So I caught up with my friends who were like my co-founders, who were way ahead of me. And I was like, guys, you're not going to believe what happened. And they didn't believe me. For hours, they didn't believe me. Like, I'm like, we're going back to the room now, and we're going to start to prepare. They're like, no, we have like 2 days left in our trip here. I'm like, no, this is real. I'm not fucking around with you guys. This is totally real. And we cut the trip short, went home, and had this incredible, it's a real long story about our meeting with Steve out here, but to sell the company. And, ever since then, I moved out. I reported to Steve. I was one of 2 VPs. The other one was Eddie Q, who runs everything. If you're an Apple fanboy now, he is iTunes, everything. He's amazing and was a great mentor to me. And he told me that I needed to move out here. Originally said we didn't, and then changed his mind. He called me on Christmas Day after we had told the whole company that we didn't have to move. And he said, hey, it's Steve. I said, hi, Steve. Terrified every time, he had his own ringtone. Every time that ring went off, I just poop myself. And he was like, I pick it up, and I go, hey, Steve, Merry Christmas. He's like, did you buy a house yet? I was like, no. What do you mean I have a house? He's like, yeah, out here, like Los Altos, Palo Alto's nice. I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. You were literally, we just told the company like 10 days ago and said no one had to move. He's like, yeah, I changed my mind. Boston sucks. Everyone's got to move out here. I was like, everybody? He's like, no. Keep the bozos in Boston. Bring out the good people. He's like, let us know if you need help looking for a house. Click. I was like, come on. So I go out, and I started working in January, and I was commuting Monday to Friday, and I ended up buying a house that is like 4 houses away from him, a block away, literally the same house, but on the block up. And I didn't even know he lived there, because it's so private, and the neighbors would never say anything. And I was going I bought this house. There was no houses for sale really in Palo Alto at the time. It was 2010, believe it or not, it was a recession. And I was unpacking stuff out of my car, because every week I'd bring a little bit more and throw in the house, because my family, I had 2 little kids. They didn't move out until the school year. And one day I'm throwing the stuff in the car, and I see Steve walking in front of the house with Tim Cook. And I'm like, oh no. So I get on my phone. I'm like, where does Steve Jobs live? And I'm like, oh shit, I just bought a house around the corner from him. And so my whole life was, all Steve all day long. And since then, even now, like you say, like everyone loves the Steve Jobs stories, of which there are plenty. There are many.
It sounds like, in that case, because I was going to ask, since you knew him in the latter years, if you actually got the full Steve Jobs experience. It sounds like you did, because if people don't know, the thing you said there, where, you'd been told it's fine, you don't have to move out. And then he doesn't just call up and say, I'd like you to move here. He just calls up like, right, you need to move now. Yeah. Like, that's a thing that is obviously like infamous about him. It's a famous thing within Apple. They call it the reality distortion field, where he just decides one day, like, this is reality now for everyone. And the idea is, it's almost like the emperor has no clothes type scenario. Everyone just has to go along with it. Everyone has to just go, yep, that's it. That's the new world we all live in. Whatever he said is what was always going to happen. And yeah, we're all on board. Like, did you get that side of working with him? Like, was he a guy where if he decides something, everyone just has to go that direction?
100,000%, because when I got him, when I was working with him, he was dying, and he knew it. and he was going as fast as possible. He was.
Oh, that made him more intense in that regard. Okay.
It was awful. I mean, if I had any hair then, it would have been gone, because I hated it. I mean, I loved it. I loved Steve as a guy, as a person. I think you would have liked him, Thorin, because he was just so freaking direct, and it was like there was no time for crap, right? And he didn't suffer fools at all. So if he thought you were bullshitting him or you didn't have all your facts, you were gone. Like, it wasn't like, I'm not talking to you now. It was like, yes, you're gone. You're out, right? Go get another job. But yeah, so I got there with my co-founder, a brilliant guy, Ishwar Priyadarshan, who was a big Steve fanboy, and I was not. Not that I didn't like him. I just didn't know, it wasn't my, I was more into, I was fanboying sports than as opposed to tech CEOs. And I remember we were there for like a month, and we were the first good-sized company Apple ever bought. Like they never bought, Steve wasn't about having people all over the world. He wasn't about buying people and then trying to make them Apple people, which he told me all the time. He was like, I bought you. I didn't hire you. You're not an Apple guy. You got to learn how to think like an Apple guy. And I remember sitting in Max, which is the cafeteria, with Ishwar, and he looked at me and he goes, what do you think of all these people here? And I was like, meaning? He's like, they're a bunch of assholes, aren't they? And I was like, yeah, everyone thinks their crap doesn't stink, and everyone's so pompous here. And I was like, yeah. And then 2 months later, I remember we had the same talk. Ishwar was saying like how great everybody is and how they're the smartest people he's ever worked with. And then I was like, wait, what happened to, everybody was a bunch of, whatever. And he's like, yeah, we've been totally brainwashed. Like, right. But it did not take long to be like, you'd go to Steve and you'd say, hey, I think I could build this. It'll take 9 months. He's like, I think this is great. You'll get it back to me in 8 weeks. And you'll be like, no, I said 9 months. He's like, yeah, 8. I'll give you 10. I'll give you 10 because you're new and you're slow, but you can do this in 10. And you'll be like, it's not even possible to get the code. No, you have 10 weeks. And you'd get it done somehow. Like, if people would sleep over and it'd be brutal, and you'd try and innovate. And I don't even know if Steve thought you'd get it done in 8 or 10, but it became almost, a game where if you wanted 3 months, you'd ask for 12, and you'd battle with him. And for me, I led a division, and I had a meeting with him every Tuesday afternoon, which was the worst and most exhilarating time of my life. Like, from literally maybe an hour after it ended, when everybody would call how to go, to the next Tuesday, I was a jerk. Like, I hated it. It was stressful. I was trying to figure out what I needed to talk about. I would have these pieces of paper on my desk, and I'd write down all the things I needed, because I was starting up an ad division, and they didn't have anything, and he didn't even really understand the business well. And I had to win little pieces every week, right? Things I wanted to build the business, but make sure I didn't give back anything. So, and whatever I presented, I had to be like, that was Apple, right? Apple is about, if you go to the Marcom department and you look outside the wall on there, they have a famous installation. You can see the picture online, and it says simplify, crossed out, simplify, crossed out, simplify. And that's it, right? That's Apple in a nutshell. Not lowest common denominator, but just the most easily and elegantly consumed solution for the consumer. And so when you talk to him, you had to simplify everything down to its core, which is how he was able to make so many decisions with the same group of people, no focus groups, no, committees, nothing. Just like, give me all the information you have. I'm going to take it at face value, and we're going to make decisions. And they move so fast, and they cranked. So I would have these pieces of paper, and these are the things I wanted to accomplish. And I would have this person get this information and this and this. And then I'd keep synthesizing. And sometimes I'd end up with like 5 things on a piece of paper after a week. And I'd be like, shit, I have an hour and a half meeting with Steve Jobs. I can't go into 5 things, And other times I'd be like, oh, I have too much stuff. And it got to the point where my guys kept saying to me, well, just tell Steve this and just tell Steve this. And I was like, no, don't. I brought my whole team together. I said, no one ever tell me, just tell Steve this again. If you want me to tell Steve this, you tell Steve this, because it doesn't work that way, right? You guys need to think like an Apple person. You need to just get rid of the rest of the crap, be able to multitask, cut everything down to its core, and then decide how important this thing is. And it took a while for us to think like Apple people, which was Steve's point. Like, I didn't hire you, I bought you. And when I started to get that skill, then I could do a lot of stuff, right? I could really scale myself, and our team understood how to interact with the other teams at Apple. And people who didn't talk to me that way, I was just like, and even now, even with my wife, she's like, "You're being an asshole." Like I'm always like, "Can we just distill this down to its core and move on?" So, but it's a great skill to have, and working there was a blessing, and also just the most stressful time of my life.
So do you think then, I mean, you've kind of alluded to it, do you take some of those qualities into, for example, NRG when you work there? Because actually, I think you can make a pretty good analog for the position Steve Jobs was in. As you say, he was trying to work in all these fields where he's not the expert about mobile phones, about music players and stuff, but he's the decision maker. He's the guy who's going to be decisive if you give him the info. So I'm sure when you work with all the different games you work with, like, it's not until recently we've really had the real general managers in esports. Most of the time, it's the owner. The owner plays that role. Right. I always tell people most of the owners are like Jerry Jones in the NFL. Like, they really are the ones who make the decisions. They just have a guy who comes to them, gives some advice, and they make the final call because it's their money at the end of the day. These are really startup businesses. So do you have a similar way in esports? Do you try to be like a guy who can be cutthroat and make the decisions?
Yeah, I think so. So I didn't know anything going in. I still, I'm super involved, and there's certain games, like I've probably watched the most Overwatch in the world of any person who's never really played the game, but I understand it. I would never, ever, tell Hector anything about Call of Duty or any of our games. We have a guy, Jamie Kohenko, who is amazing, and he builds all of our teams. And it's more about like, I trust them with the players and the market, and it's more for me is just understanding, like, is this the right time to get in here? Is this going to be good for our brand? Should we really go this deep? Like, I think you and I, the one time we met, talked for briefly about, we had just sold our Counter-Strike team. Like, why? Like, we had finally done it the right way and spent 3 years building a team that was, a top team, and why get out then? And like, it was those type of decisions. But I clearly could see from the beginning that esports is a journey, right? This is not a get in, get out, flip a business. And we're already in it. I'm in it personally almost 5 years now, which is, for me, that's a long time doing anything. And I love it. I hate it. It's kind of similar, and infuriating, and there's no path, which is what I like. Like, you get involved in NBA, the Kings have a team and we get revenue from the league, and we can count on this much in distribution and this much in, tickets and our local revenue, and, thank you, good night, drive safely. But that's not the case with esports. So I try to empower our guys a ton, working here. We have a bunch of people who sometimes come in and they're like, I really, Andy, I really respect what you've done with Apple, or Steve Jobs is my idol, or I've idolized Hector for a long time and I want to work for you guys. And that's a definite no, right? Then we can't hire those people because, like Steve said, oh, you'll love this one. Like, and I've taken this one little piece into my work, but it seems extreme. But Steve, so I'd have my paper, right? On my Tuesday meetings, or I'd make a keynote, of course, not a PowerPoint, God forbid, but a keynote presentation, and he'd never look at it. And I'm always like, I spent so much time on this, or let me just slide this over and show you, right, like what we're talking about. And he's like, no, he was never going to look at it really, unless it was numbers or something. And so I'd ask him, I said, why aren't you looking at, what I present to you? And he's like, well, if I look at what you presented, how you framed the conversation, then you own the conversation from the beginning. I don't have beginner's mind, which is a great term. It's
from Zen or something, I think.
Yeah, just like, I don't want anybody to tell me how to think or how to look at a problem.
Sure.
And so I'm not going to look at your piece of paper. I'm not going to look at your keynote. And I like to do that here as well at NRG. I was like, Valorant, tell me why. Like, let's go. I don't want to think, don't show me. Let's talk this thing out. Like, should we be in this now? Should we not be in this? Well, Counter-Strike, yes or no? Overwatch, is this really going to work for us? Is this not going to work for us? How do we grow the brand part as well as, the revenue part? Because they don't necessarily go hand in hand. So it's a cool challenge.
That's actually very interesting then, because coming into the conversation, I have to say, when I saw your background before esports, I would have actually read it a different way. I mean, like I said, I only listen to one podcast, so I don't claim to know you very well. But like, my initial,
too much.
Fair enough. My initial read would have been like, I know a lot of people who came into esports, and this is the secret for fans who get shocked when they find out that everyone loses money. Here's the surprise. these guys know it going in. They think it's a startup business, or it's like a business they're hoping to buy in low now, and one day it's worth a lot. Like they don't think they're going to make $10 million a year of like profit from these companies. But as a result, like I say, a lot of the people coming in, the way they justify it is a startup, and it's different to what you were saying. They're not here for 20 years, Andy. They're here because it's a startup. They want to get in on the ground floor. They want to have a sick business. Like a lot of people who do startups, they want to scale it to the max, to get all the investment, flip it for hundreds of millions, maybe buy into another startup small again, maybe go do a different business. They want to make it like a step on a ladder that's nothing to do with esports after rung one or rung two. You're saying like you want to be in it long term though. And then also another thing is, if I had to say the number one thing that it kills me when I hear stories about people who are the owners and the people with the investment money, is it's when they do sit there and they let someone give them the PowerPoint presentation and they have all the graphs and all the bullshit pie charts, and we all know like you can very easily manipulate the data to show whatever you want pretty much. And the guys who do that stuff, they are the ones where I see them put the money in the wrong game, that they got tricked by the numbers, or they think this thing's going to be cool because a focus group told them 14-year-old kids love this next up and coming. It sounds like you've got a different route. You're kind of taking your own path.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Hector, so there's never a formal meeting. There's never going to be like a PowerPoint with Hector or a study. But it's rough. We made a ton of mistakes, right? We were in league. We got relegated. We had bad hires. People I trusted, and I was just like, I got to run this thing myself. If I'm going to go raise a bunch of money and put my own money into this, I gotta do this myself. And I have teenage boys who are big gamers and love it, and made a ton of mistakes with people, with games, with the way we were marketing and presenting ourselves. And it took us a while to like authentically find our voice. But it bothers me to no end, and I know it's going to happen. Even like with Valorant, right? Like I know, okay, if these guys aren't in this, and I'm a huge guy. It bugs everybody because I kind of think out loud in energy. But like I'm a huge guy with getting information about everybody else, not like the inside scoop, but like, okay, why would Tucker and those guys pay so much money to get into Valorant now? Okay, right. Well they're in this game, they're not in this game. Okay, why are these guys going to go blow a huge amount of money on Counter-Strike? Oh, well, they raised money to get into COD and then it didn't happen. Like that type of thing, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because we're all going to know that one of these guys, more than one of them, is going to get into a game we're in and they're going to blow the whole pay scale.
Sure.
And it's going to suck. And it's going to be like, why? And then they're going to go away. Like Echo Fox, right? Like, why did they spend $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 on the fighting game, guys, when that's just not sustainable? Maybe they should deserve it someday, but it's not sustainable. And we know that from a lot of games. And then you realize, why esports suffers, because unlike traditional sports of the NBA, where it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to get in, someone can get into these games and blow the whole pay scale and be like, oops, and leave. And they leave a wake of crap behind them that takes long time to clean up. And it's not good for the game. Maybe the players love it because they make more money, but the reality is in the long run, it's not great for the game. And it happens over and over again.
Now, let's be real. As you alluded to there, that was basically you guys when you came in League of Legends at first. You and a couple of other teams at the time were thought to be the dumb money. And then I tell you what, mate, your team in LCS was an example of a team where it had big names, but the way it was put together wasn't good. Like the players didn't fit together. They even had bad clashing personalities. And in fact, I mean, some people will never even know some of the crazy stories of some of the players and what they did in that team, because like it was outrageous shit. Don't worry about it. You don't want to, mate. But anyway, the fact that they were relegated wasn't a surprise to me, put it that way. So like, as you say, this was like kind of the big first misstep, right? Was coming into league in that regard. Mm-hmm. What do you think you learned from the league experience, and why haven't you re-entered? Because I see you in all these other franchise leagues. I mean, listen, if I wanted to be the guy with the charts and the graphs, in theory, league at the moment's the most surefire bet. It doesn't maybe have the massive upside, but it's got the nice viewership, it's got the established game, it's not even as expensive to get in as Overwatch. For a lot of people, they think that that's kind of the safer place. So what do you think with the initial league period was like, and why aren't you in LCS now?
Yeah, okay. It's a great question, because I think it sums up everything that, where we came from and what we're about now. So it was a hobby when we started the business, right? We bought the other team, I can't remember, Coast or whatever, for like $900,000 or something, $1 million. And it was myself, Shaq, and Mark Masteroff. And we were like, let's try and learn. Let's figure this thing out. And we had a guy running it, Gerard Kelly, and trusted him to do a bunch of stuff. And gosh, he just ran this thing.
He's a bit of a wild guy, put that way.
He's an interesting character, man. And it's not usually what I do. Like if I do anything, I just do it myself. But I had other jobs and stuff, and I love this space, and I wanted to learn. And my kids were super into it. And honestly, it was just a way for me to get closer to my kids and have a shared experience. Because my kids don't like basketball, God forbid. They don't like baseball. It was, soccer killed me, but they don't. And so I wanted to learn, gaming and be a better dad. And that's how we got started. And Gerard, ran it into the ground and all over the place. And we got relegated. And I learned a ton. And I talked to Mark and Shaquille, another one of our owners, Jeff Glass, my business partner. And we decided, instead of calling it a day, I said, let's double down. Let's get into other games. Let's learn and figure this thing out and grow a brand. Because, we had fun, and we did. And we got into Rocket League and Counter-Strike and Smite, and we won a world championship right away in Smite. And our Rocket League team's always, probably the best team ever. And it's always been good. Won the last world championship. And Counter-Strike was a labor of love, learning the community and trying to figure it out. And it really taught us sort of where we wanted to go and what we wanted to be. Now, when Overwatch came up for franchising, there was no franchising in League of Legends yet, right? They were talking about it. They came up right after. If I had to pick between the two at the time, I still probably would have picked Overwatch because we had the most popular Overwatch team in the world. Like, we had Seagull and those guys, and that was what we were known for. Like, we weren't known for League, really. We were known for being a failure in League. So from a brand perspective, and the game was good and people were watching, and if you had to make a choice, you probably would have made the same one, although definitely League was safer. And then getting into Call of Duty was a no-brainer because of Hector, and like instantly owning a community and having the most popular team in the world and a phenomenal, friend and mentor was a no-brainer. But we've looked at League already. Like, we were up for LCK franchise. We've been looking at that. There are teams that you could probably buy, which I'm sure on the, for North America.
Sure.
So I would like to get back in League. Having 3 franchise teams is a lot of money, though. Right.
Is there a logic, though? Like, I mean, you kind of allude to it there. Like, it's about things like, what are we about as a company, and what do we enjoy? What games are we interested in? Because I know some of the owners out there, I won't mention names, but I've had some of them who are very established esports owners who told me, look, I can just go and get investors for whatever I need. So if I tell them I've got a franchise league, it's 10 million, 20 million, whatever, I can get the investors to do that. So they basically told me, we can be in as many franchise leagues as we want. Like, again, fans think it's like your own money you're spending. You can go to someone and present the proposal, obviously. Is there a reason why you wouldn't just try and be in all the leagues and kind of like hedge your bets, as it were, and see which one takes off?
One, I don't believe you can just snap your fingers and raise money, especially now. I mean, you got to be kidding me. 2, you got to show that they work, right? The leagues don't work yet. No one's making money.
Sure.
Their enterprise value is up and down. It's only as good as someone wants to pay for it. It's also a question of scaling your operations and your business. It's big thought about how being when our name leaked that we were invited to apply for the LCK. We got great response, and a bunch of the guys in our org were like, see, people want us to do this. I was like, yeah, but like, think about, are we going to be able to be an energy level quality brand in Korea? Like, we don't even have a guy in Korea. Like, that's scaling the business in another direction, and it's taking time away from other things that we're doing. So I think we really want to be a North American brand first and foremost. And we do really well in Europe because of Fortnite, but it's somewhat of a distraction. And I think now what your comment about, snapping your fingers and raising money is dead. We're seeing a lot of orgs who can't raise money out there. There's the market's obviously terrible given COVID, the fact that people are going to show pretty rough years,
Sure.
No growth or down or losing sponsors. So, we're starting to see, if you're in, like, if I could be nerdy for a second in the startup world, because I've always been a startup guy, I'll look at like me and mobile, like the mobile space, right? You enter the space, you kind of think, oh, maybe I'm one of the only guys if you're early, and then you look up and there's like 100 other guys doing something somewhat similar, right? And then, but they start to get attention, and you start to get either revenue or an audience or whatever it is, and then people say, that's a hot space, right? Mobile's a hot space. Artificial intelligence is a hot space. Cloud computing is a hot space. place. And money comes in,
Yes.
right? Dumb money, smart money. And these guys, a whole bunch of people, and they get bigger and the valuations get too high. And then all the skeptics come in, and then you hit what they call the trough of despair, where, oh, the bubble's off. You actually have to have a real business here.
Sure.
And you go down, and the poorly
Is that where we are now?
Yeah, Echo Foxes go out. The other guys, they sell for nothing. Other guys can't raise money, right? They have a bad plan, you name it. And then there's this many, now. There was this many, now there's this many. And then you start to see them rise back up. And this is where you create your value here. Maybe there's 4 really valuable companies, or 10 or 3, whatever the industry can sustain. And with COVID, we went like this because it seems that these businesses aren't worthless by any stretch of imagination, but you have to have leadership and a real business plan and real revenue. And you're not just going to be like, hey, I want to go raise, it cost me $25 million, $30 million to buy a league team. And then I need $10 million to run a year. And, oh yeah, these guys at Liquid spend a ton. Their salaries are insane. So to compete, I need to raise $50 million. Oh yeah, that's going to just pop out of trees. No way.
Sure. Well, I mean, along those lines, one of the areas that I know a lot of fans started to get a very skeptical, and to me, like, that's the barometer. If a guy who doesn't know the business and doesn't have any connections is starting to think that something's off here, for me, was when a couple of years ago that first Forbes valuation list came out where they valued all these companies. I mean, well, you've already referenced them, so since they're gone, I'll reference them as well. The first one that jumped out to me was Echo Fox, was something like 3rd on this list. They were valued at like hundreds of millions, and then even the games listed were all like fighting games, which, if you know esports, like, each are incredibly small. And as you said, they basically, that was like they made the whole market there. They just inflated. So I don't know how that can then be valued, because if you inflated it yourself, like, that doesn't really make any sense. There's nothing there. And as you see, when they left the space, yeah, guess what? The salaries go right back down. There's nothing keeping them up. It was artificially inflated. Yeah. Like, when people see things like that, they are either going to think the whole industry's a bubble, it's all fake, it's just going to blow up eventually, investor confidence is going to disappear, or they're going to think, are the people who report these numbers corrupt? Is the mainstream, are they idiots? Like, what's your take on it? How could they be so far off on some of these?
Well, the revenue numbers, I think, were bullshit because they were self-reported, right?
Yes. Some of those were way too high.
We weren't in that one. If you notice, I think there's been 2. NRG wasn't in that one, but we were in the last one. Right. And the reason why we were in the last one is because when you raise money, you have to file with the SEC, whatever, that you raise money, and then you can see the offering number. So, like, you can see that we raised someone, I don't know what, they raised money with the Yankees or something at $135 million valuation. So that's what Forbes wrote.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. What about then? So when you came to Overwatch, as you said, this was one of the ultimate games to get people in the door, because if people notice, Blizzard's approach almost was like, some endemic esports people are allowed, but really we just want all these sports owners and tech people. And listen, you could just tell, like, some of them were people like Bobby Kotick and the other Activision Blizzard guys. Like, they were basically creating a league to get these guys through the door. Mm-hmm. So when you say you were picking between this and League of Legends, like, were you not put off by, like, for example, the very high buy-in? I mean, even to this day, one of the highest buy-ins ever. Was this not off-putting to you?
It's very off-putting. Yeah. Well, if I had, the league was not franchising then, but even if I thought that they were going to, which we'd all heard rumors they would, I don't know if we would have been invited, right? Because we had just got booted.
True.
So they liked us, like, we were good stewards of the league and we were marketing and we spent time, but we didn't have our act together. We weren't a good org. I mean, when Hector came over here from Optic, he was like, oh my God, you guys have, like, your act together. And I was like, we do, like, 'cause you never think you do when it's yours. And, the last year for us has been just amazingly competitive, successful. And then, from a fan base standpoint, but back then it was like, we can do one thing and this was our team. And we didn't even know when we were, like, signing up that we were going to lose our whole team, because all the contracts, like, all of a sudden Siegel was a free agent,
Yes.
Like, okay. Yeah. So much for that theory. I thought it was a joke. I thought the price was a joke. I still think it was too expensive. I still think, Call of Duty is too expensive. I think they're all too expensive. Like, if you want people to absorb losses for a period of time, then the buy-in price and the payment terms is just onerous. It's hard, right? And in Overwatch League, we've been the most successful team by a long shot. I mean, it's the thing I'm most proud of, really, in besides surviving and actually starting to build a nice brand that people like, is I feel like this arguably, without, well, I mean, I think the Shock's the most successful team in the history of Overwatch. And we built a great model, and we continue to win, and we continue to add pieces, and we lose that guy right there behind me, Sinatra,
Sure.
and we get better, right? And we sell off Architect, and we pull in Twilight, and the team gets better. And it's a great model for everything that we do. And I love it. I love the game. But it's got its, it's got its headwinds, that's for sure. And viewership is much harder on YouTube, and it's going to be a while. So if you're assuming that everyone's, getting into these leagues and they got tons of money, it's not the case. And it's like a marriage. It's a partnership, right? There's 20 of us in Overwatch League. There's only 12 teams, and it's way easier, and they're basically all North American for all intents and purposes in Call of Duty League, and you can make decisions and have conversations. But in Overwatch League, we have 4 Chinese teams, which have very different realities than we do.
Sure.
The game is incredibly popular there. The viewership numbers are massive there compared to North America. We have Korea, where it all began. We have 2 European teams. We have a ton of, so it's like, it's hard. It's a hard partnership. People have different goals. And like you said, you have these giant sports orgs in there who, for some of them, it's a hobby. For some of them, they're trying. For others, not much. And then you've got the endemics, guys like me and Ben Spoon every day, banging on Blizzard and Activision, trying to move the ball forward because we're living it.
When it came, one of the reasons I wasn't surprised also that the Overwatch League model was set up to be appealing to the outside orgs is the reason they wanted traditional sports orgs is another part of the business model was this idea that you'd bid for which franchise you wanted. Like the obvious example being Robert Kraft would want the Boston one because of the New England Patriots. Like it makes sense with his business. And if you sell him on the idea this is going to become a stadium thing, and in the future you're going to have your regional sponsors, I mean, he's going to think, I've got that market sold up already. So I get that angle, right? Being more of an endemic guy, was there a reason you picked San Francisco? I mean, you're from Massachusetts. Did you not want to go for that Boston one?
I live in San Francisco, so that was it. Mark lives there. Here was the deal. You could not – the only exception I think they've ever made is that Hector and I got Chicago, and we're not in Chicago because optics, it's, Hector living there, and the fact that the whole Midwest are pretty much Huntsman fans now. But you needed to show that you have strong ties to the local market, an ability to market to the market, hold events, and then – create a fan base in that market. So people who owned arenas, people who were event organizers, people who were relatively well known in those markets. So everyone had to sort of be in their home market. That was the theory.
Right, here's one of those questions that could be dangerous, not for me, for you. So you'll have to decide how you answer it. Is one of the areas I personally am very skeptical of the Overwatch League, and some of this is informed as well. It's my own read on the industry. Is when I see the actual success of the league in all metrics like viewership, how it seems to be doing in terms of partnerships, and then I hear rumblings of what size these deals are and what kinds of deals they're angling for. I often find myself a bit underwhelmed by the concept of the hierarchy of Overwatch League, because I'll put it this way. Based on the things I know, I personally feel as though people who work for the Team Liquids, the Cloud9s of the world, some of these people, their specialty is selling these sponsorships, getting these big partnerships with enormous companies for tens of millions of dollars. I feel like the actual individual orgs might be better at doing that than the league itself. But the problem is you guys aren't the league. You're beholden to the league. It's on the league to get those deals and the partnerships in terms of bringing in the league revenue. Is there not any kind of an issue for you there?
Actually, I feel that's an easy one to answer because and I'm very outspoken if you ask the other owners at the owners meetings, especially Overwatch. But I would say if there's anything I can give a 10 out of 10 to for the Overwatch, for Blizzard Activision, it's selling sponsorships. I mean, They crushed it. Look at the math on year one of Overwatch League versus every year combined of League of Legends. I don't think League is still even close to Overwatch League over the last 3 seasons. They've done a phenomenal job there. Now, Distribution rights, maybe different story. I don't think that was their forte, but selling sponsorships, they've been very good, and they've been able to pull in, really great brands. So that's not what I think where any of the owners have any of their real issues.
Okay. In terms of Overwatch, as you said, I mean, you alluded to it, but if people don't know the specifics, your team was one of the ones that has been very ruthless with your moves. Like in season 1, you basically almost tanked the team because you wanted to secure Sinatra and Super, these young players who weren't eligible yet. Now that's a massive gamble because, even if a player, it might look like the next star, you can never guarantee it. And it obviously paid off to the maximum. The guy was the MVP of the next split, and you had the year rather, and you had all the success. You won all the championships. You had the unbelievable amount of success. But then after that, you let him go to Valorant, and then, as you say, you do different moves. You brought in Krusty, obviously, from Boston Uprising, which is a big move. Like, you certainly haven't been afraid to spend money. So in Overwatch specifically, have you kind of turned your people loose? Like, if they really believe in this guy, you willing to be the big spender?
Yeah, we are and we aren't. Like, I think there's a great reputation that there's some meme out there that says like a mailer and it's like a wallet, and when we got a wallet, whatever. And the reality is, we're not. I mean, we're not even in the top 5, 6, maybe 7 in payroll. And we're really smart with our contracts. It's a lot like the Patriots. Like, once we got Krusty, I was like, this is the best coach I've ever dealt with. He is a coach. He's a general manager. His eye for talent is incredible. There's a guy, Ons, who's on our team now, who's our rookie, who he wasn't even playing.
Nobody, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he was on YouTube, and Krusty's like, he's freaking unbelievable, and we're going to hide him. I'm like, hide him? No one even knows who he is. He's like, we're going to hide him, and we're going to sign him, eventually. And we did, and I'm hoping he's actually MVP this season, but, if he's not Rookie of the Year, I'd be bummed. He's unbelievable because he has that eye for talent. But what he also is, he doesn't suffer fools either. So if you're, not participating, or like Sinatra, whose heart wasn't in it, like Krusty called me up, he's like, I think Jay should go. He's not practicing well. And I'm like, Sinatra? He's like, yeah, like, we don't need him. We'll do better without him. I love him, but it's just not. He wants to do something else, and I want him to be happy. And I was like, "Are we dead?" He's like, "No, we'll be fine. We'll be better. We'll just be different. We'll just keep adapting." So we had guys like Twilight who came to us and said, "Hey, Vancouver imploded. Whatever. I got a bunch of teams who offer me all this money, but I want to play for Krusty. I want to be a winner. I want to be a champion." And that's the best feeling when you create a platform with people who want to win. And if you want to do something else and be goofy, funny, popular, memey, go someplace else. But if you want to win, come play for, Krusty and Chris Chung, who's the best GM out there. And I feel like we have that platform now where we keep, adding parts to it. That's the best thing. But we we bought Stryker from Boston, and because Krusty was like, we have to have him. And I'm sure those guys ripped me off. I spent a ton of money on it, but we wouldn't have won the championship without it. So it kind of worked.
What would you say to that? I mean, it's a fairly obvious comment that people have made publicly. What would you say to the comment that just optically, it's a really bad look when the MVP of the league leaves the game entirely, especially when they're that young, and then goes to a game that basically doesn't exist as an esport yet? Like, what would your answer to that be?
Yeah, 100%. Doesn't look good. I agree with you. It sucked. A lot of it is the person, though, as well. So Jay... he's a restless kid, and he accomplished everything he wanted to accomplish, and he wanted to do something different, and so it made him happy. And Overwatch is a grind, Overwatch. Yes. I don't think people realize it seems
like the number one game to burn people out.
Easily, because the meta changes. Forget about the players. I say this all the time. Players, of course. The coaches. I mean, I have so much respect and marvel for these guys. The dedication that they put in, it's insane, especially with hero pools. Like, they decide on Sunday afternoon or night, right? Here's the heroes for next week. The coaches were staying up 48 straight hours because they have to come up with a whole new meta. And then the players would come in because they'd get their day off Monday, Tuesday, and they just try crap out for 2 days and see what worked and what didn't work. They hated it. At least our guys, a lot of them did, because they were just wasting. They weren't getting better. They were just, hey, Stryker, today you're Genji, whatever, right? And they didn't like it. And then by Thursday, Friday, they had to settle in on their plan, and then they play on the weekend and then do it all over again on Sunday. It was exhausting, right? How many times has this meta changed? That's why I'm so proud of this, what we've built here, because the Overwatch League has thrown everything in the book at us. I'm sure they're not doing it on purpose because they want another winner, but like, we went from the best Ghost team to this change to Striker. Oh, you're not playing now the whole season. Oh, now it's the playoffs. They changed it back. You can play, like, to Hero Band, to you name it. And we've been able to stay on top. So, but it's a grind. So back to Jay, he was like, I think he was just burned out on it. Somebody offered him a lot of money to his own place to play with whoever he wanted to, with a bunch of friends, with no real competition. They offered him more money than I was paying him, and I didn't even bother countering.
It sounds like, even though I set it up earlier, that a lot of orgs, even to this day, quite frankly, their general manager, it's a title, but it's not what you think of in sports. Like, it's not the guy who's, scouts the players, does the deals, decides the terms, puts his own arse on the line. It's often a guy who's the lackey of the owner, and his job is, know the game, but the owner gets like, listen, some of these, remember, you have to remember people who are businessmen who didn't come from a successful background before, like, to them to have the 50 millions, like, they think they've succeeded because they convinced someone else to give them the investment money. So some of them, it's arrogance. They're playing. They're trying to. They want to be the one in control. They want to pilot the ship, as it were. It sounds like your approach is much more in line with what you'd want from a sports approach, though, right? You pick the general manager, and then it's his job. He has to somewhat live and die by the trades, and you hope you've got the right guy. And if you haven't, like maybe in League of Legends, you have to learn from it and hire a new guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, starts with the coach. We never had a good coach in League. We didn't have any infrastructure. It's definitely the infrastructure. We took a bunch of years to build the infrastructure, and Chris and Krusty and Overwatch, they're, a self-contained unit, and Jamie and pretty much all the other games, except for Hector and Scump, doing their own GMing, if you will, putting together Call of Duty for the Huntsman. And they got to know everybody's ins and outs and who's happy and who's unhappy. And like, we knew that Krusty was unhappy at Boston, and he felt disrespected, and he wanted to move. And, that was a big opportunity for us, and Boston was cool with letting him go. But that changed everything. Like, if you don't have that infrastructure, it just doesn't work. And we took three years to build the infrastructure, and then last year, boom, right? It was Shock wins the world championship, and Rocket League wins the world championship, and Apex and Fortnite win everything, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you know what? We're pretty darn, and Counter-Strike makes it to number 2 and wins a bunch of tournaments. Like, we know what we're doing here. It's okay, right? We don't have to have a giant facility and training center and massage therapists and whatever. You need to have a really good coaching staff and infrastructure and planning and a real nurturing kind of family around it. And by having that also let us then start to work on the brand, because just by having winning teams doesn't mean you're going to be a successful business. And so we made a giant announcement 2 days ago where we added clicks to our Fortnite roster. And you can say what you want about Fortnite competitive, but man, Clicks had 200,000 concurrents going when he made his announcement that Shaq made for us that you alluded to, and he broke Twitch, went down. And when he came back up, he had 80,000 for like the next 24 hours or whatever it was. That's 200,000 concurrents is more than the Overwatch League. Right. And that's a kid. So that is all a piece of the pie, right? It's all where you kind of grow your audience and how you can bring in sponsors and how you can create, some affinity and love for your brand.
Actually, I wanted to ask about that, because that's the area where, by the way, a lot of big esports orgs that have enormous payrolls are masking the losses. Is if I get told by FaZe Clan or TSM, like, we actually make money, it's like, not from the esports side. Don't keep pretending that's real. Like, what you mean is your guide sites, your streaming guys, they make money because, like, people can probably understand if you have the biggest streamer in the world, all he needs is a webcam, PC, he plays. The expenses are very little, but you're making loads, as you say. Now, as far as I know, with the really big teams, that's what you currently have. You either have the teams that are going pure esports, they're trying to be like a sports franchise, they're just going to make their money one day down the line. Or in this case, I'm assuming if you sign players like this, you're not doing it just for what they can do in the competitive, right? You want your streamers, you want the people where that in itself can be a massive money maker. And obviously, I mean, people probably know the biggest metric in esports isn't concurrent anymore. It's our total viewed hours per month or whatever. So streamers are the ultimate people to deliver on that. And in this case, at high volume. So like, is that now a central part of the NRG approach, having the streamers? I know back even in the Gerald Kelly days, it was like, there was certainly some of that back then. Yeah.
Well, the goal really is, a ways back we talked about it, and this is before we start to win a lot. and we're talking with Shaquille. We actually have another investor, Tiesto, the DJ.
Sure.
He's amazing. And these guys are their own brands, right? And Marshawn Lynch, actually, was the three of them. There's a funny story.
Pretty good trifecta.
Yeah, exactly, right? Three guys who couldn't be any different. And they were just basically like, look, we play a lot. We play a ton of games. Like, at one point we skinnied down. We had a lot of teams. Like, we play all the time. We win, we lose. Like, you can't live and die by this. And it's not going to make you, a giant org, because it's all just a bunch of different communities, and you're trying to put them all together in one Twitter account or whatever. And, guys who love League don't necessarily care at all about fill in the blank, right? So that was a big eye opener for us. But what they cared about was the stories and the content and the lifestyle and being a gamer, because they associated themselves with a game, with a particular player, with a particular content creator. So our goal is really being more of a media company. We create a lot of content. We have a guy, Grady Rains, who brought us just a terrific voice, which really, last night was a big night for us. We had some million view videos on YouTube. We hit 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, 1.2 million on Instagram, all in the same night. And we are getting insane engagement. I think we get overlooked. If I was to plug us, I think we get overlooked a little bit in that we're a bunch of brands. So if you were to add up the Huntsman, Shock, and NRG on our platforms, we're up there. We're as big as anybody in content every month. But because unfortunately, because of the way Activision and Blizzard neutered us and chopped us up and made us do separate brands, we can't be looked at as 100 Thieves or FaZe Clan, right?
Sure.
One thing. So that's the thing, right? Like, in the TSM has their guides and their blitz, and of course you're associated with Cloud9 with their tournaments and league ownership, and others want to be event organizers, and others want to be other things. Because if you're just a pure esport, you're going to be waiting a long time to make a profitable business.
Yes.
You can burn through a lot of money. But if you're the Dallas Cowboys, and I know you had Jason on, who's amazing, like, you can give Jason a budget and say, okay, this is part of our empire, go for it, do your thing, right? And I think Liquid is somewhat similar with the way Axiomatic's set up. Well, we're not. We're just a business, and we're not endless pockets. And that's the reason we decided to drop out of Counter-Strike. That's the reason why we moved to Call of Duty. Like, you have to kind of, in my mind, implement that Silicon Valley, Facebook philosophy of fail fast and figure out what works. And when it does, drive it until it doesn't work anymore.
Let's talk about that then. Let's talk about, obviously, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Counter-Strike. As you said, I think you perfectly characterized it before. You spent years building it up, and basically, right at the moment your team was about to break through, you just finished top 4 at the major, you had chances to even win that tournament. Afterwards, you sell the team to Evil Geniuses. They immediately win their first tournament. They're number 2 in the world rankings. Like, this is unprecedented stuff for where the team would have even been 6 months earlier, a year earlier. So to the outsider, it looks like you got out at exactly the wrong time.
Yeah, I thought it was exactly the right time in my mind. So it was the same weekend they won the big tournament that we won Overwatch League. Like,
yes.
I couldn't imagine. That would have been so killer. But we were so happy for the guys. I sold high. Like, that's the market, right? Buy low, sell high. Like, look at it now. I don't know. What are they top? They're 10, maybe? I don't know.
They're not. They're way lower now, yes.
Yeah. They're really expensive. That was the bottom line. Like, we kept adding. There's no rules, right? There's all these poachers and other people that we know about just bugging the guys all day long, getting in their ear. I mean, they're their own businesses. I don't blame them, but it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want certain guys talking to my guys every day. Hey, we'll offer you this. You should do that. Break your contract. We'll don't worry. We'll pay your legal fees on this stuff. I was like, this is dumb. And they said, hey, I know you guys just offered 20 whatever. Thought we'll pay you. We want 30-something thousand a month. I was like, well, we don't have any sponsors for this game. Maybe one, and we're competing with European teams that have betting sponsors, which we can't have in the U.S. And we pay for all your stuff, and maybe we're just not the right guys for Counter-Strike right now. Like, maybe we don't get the culture well enough or see where the big opportunity is, because it was just a different fan base, and we love the game. And I definitely, with Jamie, like every other week, he's like, what about this team? You want to get back in this? I'm sure we will someday, but it was nuts. And we knew that what you were putting together, with Jack and Monty was coming, and people were talking about having to buy teams. And all of a sudden, something where there's no inherent value to it had millions of dollars of value, and we had multiple people interested in buying it. So I was pretty happy. Plus, we had also decided to go into Call of Duty at that time, and we needed the money. So I think it was the right thing to do.
So, okay, let's talk about that angle then. Because as I said before, if you've been in all these other leagues, Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, at one point in time you were in the franchise in LCS, but you had an LCS team that you bought, as you said, for almost $1 million. Why not Flashpoint? Isn't Flashpoint a way, by the metrics of Overwatch League, etc., to justify coming into CS and spending the money? I certainly understand, by the way, the angle that, listen, the sponsorship angle is very different. In fact, that's one of the ways I sold those guys on doing it as an adult theme. I told them, don't keep going after like the Disney sponsors. You're not going to get them for CS. So why not go get a whiskey sponsor? Why not have a guy in the future, I hope, and we'll talk about this, betting companies. Like, these are the obvious people. I mean, listen, American companies shouldn't need to know about this. You sell the cigarettes by doing it about the rebel outlaw background. It's all about the lifestyle angle you're going to sell it on. So was Flashpoint not alluring in that sense as like a reason to come into Counter-Strike and spend money? By the way, don't feel any qualms about telling me it's rubbish. You can tell me that if you want.
No, not at all. I love the idea that Flashpoint was coming together, and ESL, everybody was trying to figure out what they were doing, and all of a sudden there was competition, and then people were calling me and saying, "Hey, I know we've never talked, but I'd really like to get your opinion on our league," or it's like, gee, because it's such a wild west of just different pieces, and I was like, this is what every industry needs, right? You need competition, you need people to innovate, and you guys were doing a lot of interesting things. For us, whether we did Flashpoint or anything else, we still had to pay those guys all that money or start all over again with another team. And I knew that you guys were recruiting orgs that didn't even have teams, right? Yes. So there was a lot of that comment. So then it was like, you wouldn't believe how many guys were just, call me up. You want to talk to our guys? No one says a bad thing about NRG as far as standing in the way of our players. Just give us a call. If you want to talk, we'll figure it out, right? But it was absolutely, I couldn't even deal with it anymore. There's one particular team which you're not big fans of that was just nonstop.
I could probably guess.
Fuck this, I'm done.
Okay, then along those lines, then actually one thing you touched on there, but you didn't make explicit, maybe for people who just are slow following the industry stuff, isn't that also a flaw that Counter-Strike has? Listen, if you want to talk about inflated salaries, I can at least understand inflated salaries in games where everyone's had to invest hundreds of millions of dollars. It's like, people aren't going to abandon it overnight. Counter-Strike is the game where there are people who are getting more salary in Counter-Strike teams at the top end than some of the like world championship teams and some of the other big esports games. Like in that area, that must be a thing that's a big put off, right?
That was it. Yeah. There was no payout. Like, to what end? Like, really hard to get sponsors, obviously. You just said with the terrorists, counter-terrorists, blood and guts. The best game, great game, awesome game to spectate, just so easy to understand. I have a blast every time I go to them. The guys are cool, but it's a hard business, right? And it's very European-focused. And like, if you looked at we get calls from some of our, you'll find this interesting, some of our sponsors of other teams, but since like we talked about, like Twitter has our, at the time has our Overwatch team in there, and it has this team and Rocket League and Fortnite and Counter-Strike. And if we would lose a match, like, it would be like, because people were betting on it, like the hate was huge. Like, you guys suck, you should all go kill yourselves, this is the worst match. Like, that doesn't happen.
So they thought it was a PR nightmare, right?
Yeah, it doesn't come in Fortnite. You don't get you go, whatever. So it was like not a good vibe. Like, the vibes were rough. So the economics I never really understood it. I'd like it to work, and I know that's what you guys are trying to accomplish at Flashpoint.
Right, listen, I allowed you the carte blanche to say anything about Flashpoint, so now I have to be the skeptical guy again. So here's the question about CDL, Call of Duty League, which is, listen, I'm not someone who from day one of the Overwatch League thought it couldn't succeed. I've certain things I've grown more skeptical of over time, and I certainly think they didn't land the plane on all the execution of certain things in the ways they could have probably early on that I think would have accelerated it. But I have to say, I'm very puzzled by the Call of Duty League and how many people wanted to buy in and how popular it is with the industry people. Because here's my problem, right? Overwatch League at least could play the angle of, we've never really tried making this game global, because at the time, Blizzard let the third-party scene run all the tournaments, and then they were going to make the Overwatch Leagues. The idea was, now we're going to build the big league, and we're going to go for the big viewing numbers, whether they made it or not. Obviously subjective, depends on where you're coming from. But the problem I have is Call of Duty always has had the issue where the viewership has plateaued years ago. Like, it's never been the game that has like the million concurrents, mate. It doesn't have like, like when the Counter-Strike majors come along and we set those records. It's never really been that game. Like, it's always had an enormous mainstream appeal. Of course, every year when they bring the game out, it's massive. People play it. But on the esports side, they've never fully been able to make it. Like, let's be real. It was never as big as CS, etc. It's never been able to break through in that way. So what is the potential you see in CDL? What entices you about that league?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, I love Overwatch, as you know, but I'm way more bullish on CDL right now. And the reasoning is, one, it's very American. So the audience is very North American focused, which is really important as we look at the audience of League or Overwatch. It's, heavily Asian.
Sure.
So if you want sponsors and dollars, and these are American companies, they're not going to put their money when the viewers are in China. One, two, a new game comes out every year. So you have that opportunity to be reborn, refreshed. Three, it's very much rooted in popular culture. Every basketball player, football player, NBA player, athlete, celebrity, musician plays it. So it's got a cachet to it. It has its own sort of swagger, merch, and voice, which is really important to building a brand around it. Sponsors like it. We have the most sponsors of anything on that team. Now, granted, we got Hector and Scump and the boys and an audience, but we got a lot of sponsors there. Like, they're not shying away from it for some reason. Like, they shy away from Counter-Strike because of the violence of it. And this is the bonus part, so I can't say that we thought about it ahead of time, but you can say what you want about the size of the audience right now, but the player base, when you add in Call of Duty Mobile and you add in Warzone, is enormous. It's massive. Okay. It's bigger than everything else.
It's untapped market to you.
Exactly. So you got to get those people. So first I started thinking, well, how do we get these people to watch, the Huntsman? How do we get them to watch Call of Duty League? And then I started talking with a bunch of folks and realized that we don't have to, right? We can offer other things that we still own. So Call of Duty League could involve Call of Duty Mobile League. It could involve, Warzone tournaments. It doesn't have to be Keemstars, owning these tournaments. It could be us being involved in it. And then all of a sudden, it's what I've always said, which is why I want to be a media company, which is I really feel the esport part is awesome and it's a core, and some things are pure and a lot of things aren't. And so if you try and make them a pure esport, it just doesn't work. It's entertainment and it's fun. And I look at my kids and they love to watch certain things and they play all these games, but they don't watch these, certain competition because that's not what they're into, but they still like the game.
Yes.
So I think there's a way bigger overall economic opportunity in Call of Duty League, whereas Overwatch doesn't have a war zone, right? It doesn't have these offshoots. So it's more of like sink or swim.
Yeah, again, just to translate it to the layman there, what you're basically talking about is within the world of Call of Duty, because like the actual bonus it has, like you say, is an enormous untapped casual market of people who are aware of it, play it, or even play it on mobile phones. Mm-hmm. The point is, just from a media empire side, like complementary businesses, there's enormous potential, whether the esport ever gets to 1 million concurrents or not. Like, that could be irrelevant,
Right. 100. That's it. Exactly.
Yes. Right, one last topic I wanted to touch on, because it's something I think we're both aligned on based on what I heard on that podcast, episode 2 of the Duo podcast with you and Hex, which was you said that the main area you're putting your money now, and this is the thing I've been waiting for years, because I used to have a sponsorship from one of these companies back when fantasy esports was a thing, and it's for betting to fully open in the US. Like, I've told so many people, it's funny that there are elements of esports that are a bubble, but if tomorrow someone ever turns on the betting faucet in the way it is in like my home country of the United Kingdom, where you can bet on anything from a $1 thing to $100, all the skills where you can bet on everything in football. It's not even considered much of like a taboo over there. It's just a thing people do, especially the average person, I've always said the second that faucet gets turned on, we'll all be making profit. Forget the idea that like we're going to be surviving. At that point in time, like I'll be on like enormous sponsorship on my channel. Everyone, like that's really the play, right? As soon as sort of the culture shift can happen, and especially the legislative sort of maneuvers take place, that could be the game changer for esports, right?
So close, so close. So we already saw big acceleration during the pandemic, like in Vegas. All of a sudden, you can bet there in Overwatch League and Call of Duty League. And the idea, if there's a league around it, that seems to feel like it's more regulated, unlike, say, Counter-Strike, where there's a bunch of stuff, so they have to worry about cheating and all that. But you are 100% right. Like, let's just take a look at the U.S. betting market, right? Forget about Europe, which has been forever. It's enormous. Okay. And everyone's waiting for California, because once California goes through, which probably now won't be until next year, but because California is kind of that bellwether that has the most people, does all the work, and then other people other states will say, okay, now we'll do it. Oh, great. Okay. What have we already seen just in anticipation of that? Barstool Sports. I'm a big fan. They've done a great job. Love the Boston, New England upbringing there. They got majority bought by Penn, who's a giant betting company, right? Because they're creating content like you're creating and podcasts, and they have a culture around gaming and betting, because betting won't be like it was for me when I was in, college, or my father, where you sneak off to your bookie or do whatever, right? It'll be just like you said in Europe, like, hey, I'm betting on every little parlay. What's this going to be? What's that going to be? What's the Eurovision winner going to be? They bet on everything, and it's easy, and it's on your app, and it's right there. And you have guys like Adam Silver, the great commissioner of the NBA, who's got such vision. And for years, he's already been talking about it. And he's going to get their integrity fee, right? So NRG is going to get our betting sponsors. Our content's going to be betting related. Flashpoint's going to be all like betted up, right?
We'll be all over that, mate.
Yeah, your podcast will be related. I mean, there's a lot of money there, and it's important, and there's a tax base, and it can be regulated, and obviously there's ills that come with betting, but it's totally manageable, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be, there's so many businesses, from the data part of it to the fantasy part of it, and I think people don't totally understand when they think betting. They think, will Shock win the summer or whatever thing this weekend?
The most simple kind, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it could be anything, right? It can be who has the first kill.
What actually transformed soccer betting in Europe was the idea, instead of betting who wins the match, you bet who's the first person to score, who's the first person to have a free kick, that wins the first yellow card, because it's the idea of it's just fun things you take a flyer on, isn't it?
And what's the biggest upshot of that? Not even from a revenue standpoint. The biggest upshot of fantasy football is what? It
keeps you interested in the game. Yeah, exactly. By the way, the same thing happened that's why Counter-Strike blew up as a game. You got all these people who wanted to bet, but they didn't follow esports, but they wanted to figure out, right, well, am I supposed to know which team to bet on? So start watching the games. Yeah.
And people worry, but it's kids betting. But it's not. Like, when you go down, average age of the Overwatch League fan that last year was 27. Average age of Call of Duty is like 26. Those aren't kids. Those are the same people betting on football every weekend.
And this is why we need it legislated, so it can be legal. Then it won't be some shady company that no one knows it's based in, fucking Cyprus or something. Exactly. It'll be Pinnacle Esports. It'll be some real company.
It'll happen. And there's so much venture money going into it, just like it did into cannabis, and now it's moving into this. And there'll be really good platforms and apps, and ways to regulate, and also just take micro bets. It's not people betting thousands of dollars.
Yes.
It's like $2 that this guy gets the first offsides call. Like, it's just fun because you're watching the match. I think it's going to be really important. I thought we would see probably a little more this year, but because of the pandemic and
understandable,
much more important, it'll probably be next year. But there's no doubt.
Right, at the end of this interview, do you have a final message or someone you want to thank?
Do I want to thank? I'm excited that you finally invited me after all these years. I feel like I really made it.
Right. Listen, mate, you're one of the few people who's a partial owner of NRG I haven't dunked on yet.
Who would I want to thank? I got the core guys, just Brett and Jamie and Grady, and obviously Hector now. I always, everything just goes so quickly, and I kind of forget that Brett Lautenbach, who's our president, has been here like 4 years already. Like, that's a light. I don't even think I held a job for 4 years, let alone had a partner in something,
Okay.
So those guys have really put so much into not just energy, but trying to make the space, trying to make it make sense and work for everybody. And hopefully this was going to be a banger year for NRG. It's still going to be a really good one and a growth year. And we got a big surprise coming up in the next 30 days or so that I think you'll see kind of where we want to be. But I'm just thankful that we have that opportunity, at this point in time when there's a lot of people hurting and looking for some fun and entertainment. And we know we have a platform, but we're trying to be very light and entertaining and fun and something you can, put your heart and your heart and mind into.
This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Spencer Green, Whattathings, Pranogo, Matt Shakowski, Tobias Bernasconi, JDubs, Alexander Rao, Xinged, the Puyallup Tribe, Jensen Goh, Hades, Andreas Kroknes, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs I do. Do you want teasers? Do you want to see who the next guests are on my shows? Do you want to take part in an in-depth esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.